My name is Fredrick Jude, and this is the Be Unstoppa podcast.
Welcome to the Be Unstoppa podcast. Me and the team are so glad that you're joining us for this episode. Your support is invaluable, and we'd be so grateful if you could hit the subscribe button. It helps us keep bringing you amazing interviews with top-notch guests. Whether you're watching on Patreon or YouTube, or listening on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Deezer, or any other platform, subscribing really makes a difference. Thank you so much for your support. Let's get back to this episode.
My name is Fredrick Jude, and my profession is I run a record company called Snapper Music, and I'm the managing director and owner of Snapper Music.
Welcome to another episode of the Be Unstoppable podcast with me, your host, Ben Wynter. Today on the Be Unstoppable podcast, we're sitting down with a man who has shaped the independent music landscape like few others. Fredrick Jude, managing director of Snapper Music, is a name synonymous with innovative thinking and business foresight in the world of music. His journey is marked by one of resilience, strategic risk-taking, and a relentless passion for music. Fred's rise in the music industry began with an underlying belief in the power of independence and entrepreneurship. After working his way up and opting for equity over salary increases, Fred didn't just help grow Snapper Music, he helped redefine its place in the music industry. Under his leadership, Snapper has secured major artists, expanded globally, and positioned itself as a major player in the independent sector. But Fred's story isn't just about business deals and corporate success. It's a personal journey shaped by pivotal choices, the challenges of balancing personal life with professional ambition, and his ability to spot and nurture talent. Today, we'll dive deep into how Fred has navigated the complexities of the music industry, what his vision for the future looks like, and the lessons he's learned along the way. Get ready for a candid and inspiring conversation with a true leader in the independent music scene. Please welcome Fredrick Jude to the Be Unstoppable podcast. And remember, Unstoppable crew, you have the power to choose your path in life, but always choose to be unstoppable. Fredrick, welcome to the Be Unstoppable podcast.
Thank you very much, Ben. It's really good to be here. And really thank you for having me. It feels like only a short time ago that we saw each other, and we first met over an interview.
That's right.
Over
an
Zoom. Over Zoom.
In COVID.
And here we are, person to person.
That's right.
A couple of times in between. But lovely to be here.
Great to have you here. Really good to have you here. You're a very innovative thinker. We love innovative thinkers on the Be Unstoppable podcast. And I had to get you on because there's things that you have done on your journey that is quite unique to the business. So I thought it'd be really good to have that conversation with you. But before we get into the business and we get into all of that, let's rewind a little bit. What was life like for a young Fred? How did your family background shape who you are today? And what role did your early life play towards you ending up in the music industry?
Yeah, so I grew up in Hackney in Stoke Newington as one of the youngest of 10 children, 7 brothers and 3 sisters. And life was always, life was good in Hackney. From outside perspective, people always saw Hackney as a bit of a, to be honest, like a shithole. Some people would say, but to us, that's what we knew. And it was a perfect place where, we played out on our bikes and, made our own toys because parents never bought you anything brand new. And being one of 10, you always had your stuff from your brothers and you were grateful. And, people would give you, hand over clothes from other families, from, family members. And you'd look forward to that bag of hand-down clothes. I go, yeah, I want to take that T-shirt. My favorite, Steve Austin, $6 Million Man T-shirt came from, from those kind of
from a hand-me-down.
From a hand-me-down. So life was, but you never knew, brand new, that was. So you just, but life was great, being one of 10. You were always kind of fighting to be heard, I suppose.
Yeah. And where did you sit in that dynamic of 10? Were you kind of older, younger, in the middle? Where did you sit in that dynamic of 10 kids?
So I always sat in. I was always the youngest, but always the smallest. But yeah, in the dynamic, it was a kind of it was a difficult kind of dynamic because there was always something going on in the house. So there was always some kind of arguments or. My brothers, one turning to be a Rastafarian, and my mum being dead against him being a Rastafarian. My mum's from Grenada, and my dad's from St. Lucia. So, the thought of their kids turning into Rastafarians was kind of alien to them.
Yeah,
so,
it's a very Jamaican thing.
Yeah, there was, So my brothers were all into dub, and my other brothers being an artist. And it was always a kind of a tumultuous household. And you just, my parents were builders as they grew up. So one thing we always had, in our life was building. And so my father used to have private jobs. He never ever worked for anyone. So we always go out building extensions, and we would always go out with him every weekend. So every weekend was, we were on a job with him, whether it be pushing a wheelbarrow up a ramp, emptying wheelbarrows at the early ages of 6 and 7. Me and my brother, my dad would take us to St. Leonard's Hospital in Hackney when it was a bombed out wreck, which was the old Homerton Hospital. Because most buildings in Hackney in those days were just wrecks, and post-war wrecks.
And what kind of period are we talking?
Late mid-70s.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was just a lot of buildings which were just kind of derelict buildings.
Yeah.
And my dad would sometimes take me and my brother and my sister. We'd take us to a site, and then we would just have to pick nails out of wood. And my dad would come later on and collect the wood, and then we would take it to to one of his jobs.
That must have been fun.
It was fun, yeah. No, it was because what kind of shaped her growing up as my father, he bought a house in Hackney, a house in Stoke Newington, which I still own to this day. And it was a very large detached house, and it defined our whole life because we spent all of our life trying to develop this house, and we ended up moving into this house in the end when it was half ready. So we spent every weekend there doing it up. It was a derelict kind of house in Kscope Crescent, and we spent our whole lives doing the whole house up until we eventually moved in. And when we did move in the end, because of financial pressures, we had no bathrooms, so we had to go to the old Hackney baths for a bath. Yeah,
those were the days where people would go to the public
baths. Yeah, so my memory of those days, I never knew when they said they were bars. Used to go there, they would turn on a tap, and then they would take the tap off, and then they would fill up the bath with hot water, and then the person who was running the bars would take the top of the tap off and leave. That was your allocated hot water for the bath.
Wow.
So that was but that was only for a short period of time until things were sorted inside the house. But yeah,
so that must have been quite a bonding experience for you and your siblings and your parents. Working on this house together every weekend, or it could have gone the other way. What was that like?
Yeah, it was always, because I was about sort of 8 to 10 years old. I always saw, some brothers didn't want to do the work, some did, because some of them were out clubbing, and because I was young, I just kind of always wanted to avoid, so I just got on with the work, and I was just used to enjoy. If they gave us a job to do, I'd say, come on, to my brother Eamon, let's just do it. And he'd go, oh, yeah, come on in, Fred. And we would literally just, do whatever, whether it would be hacking out bricks on a wall, on the scaffolding, but it was, we always look back on those years. Every time we meet up as a family, we always talk about those years when we grew up, me and my brother running around the scaffolding at age 11, which you'd never do now. You never your kids go up on the scaffolding, but that was our life then. We were well used to it. But it was a bonding experience for the whole family, and it kind of ties us, to a certain extent, together, really.
And do you think that you mentioned, your father was always building. Do you think that the building played a part in your later career metaphorically? Or is that something that has helped you in life in terms of building businesses or building careers, building your personal life?
Yeah, so my father and my mother jointly, the one thing they was always really transparent with us as kids, and maybe it was unusual, was they're always really clear with us about the financial pressures they had of trying to, when they bought a house and trying to develop it and running out of money, and the bank, at one point, trying to force them to sell and trying to raise money different ways. And my dad was always, was just very clear with us, this is what we're going through. And so we always, from a very early age, I always knew the financial implications of them, of whatever situation they were in. And it kind of, I suppose, as a child, you take it on and you just took it on. But, I was always thinking about finance and how to navigate your way through it. And sometimes I would try to give my dad ideas, and he would always be dismissive of me and go, "What do you know?" And sort of. So when they eventually opened, when they eventually moved in, we started to let rooms out to help pay for the house, and letting those rooms out to Irish and travelling builders, Scottish and Irish builders. We used to let rooms out. So, and then we do bed and breakfast, and bed and breakfast turned into mothers and babies, and then it turned into a children's home. So we were by the 90s, we were like a fully that house almost was turned into a fully fledged children's home.
Wow.
Looking after adolescent reoffenders from the ages of 13 through to 18. And I was the same age as them.
Wow. So, and you're still living there?
I'm still living there.
Wow,
yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so of the kids that we looked after are now the same age as me. And they all came to my parents' funeral a couple of years ago. Yeah, many, many years later. And they talked about how they grew up in the care home, but they, called mum and dad.
That's beautiful. That's really special.
Yeah, so.
And what type of, growing up in that way, so many people coming in and out the home, you're engaging different types of people, Irish, Scottish, like I said, mums with their kids, and then kids that have been fending, etc. What kind of impact did that have on you as a young person growing up?
I suppose you just had to, like anything, you just deal with whatever situations in front of you, and you don't kind of think of yourself as any different to anyone else. You just think your life is slightly different, but that's just the life So I suppose it shaped you. You had to grow up really quickly. I was always defending my parents half the time when these kids, I'd have to sometimes, when I was turned 15, 16, I'd have to go and be the appropriate adult for them at the police station sometimes.
Oh, wow.
Because they would, if they were called out in the middle of the night, my mum would say, "Oh, Fredrick, could you go down there?" One of them was in Hackney police station and they needed an appropriate adult, or me and my brothers would have to go down there, or they would have to go down there, we'd have to look after the care home. But through the care home, it allowed us to, then we ended up buying a house. So life wasn't always that difficult, So we bought a house in the country where every weekend our whole family would go to the house in Whitstable in Kent.
Oh, wow.
For the weekends, yeah.
And that would have been the late 80s?
That would have probably been like the 90s, yeah. 90s, yeah.
So for a black family, home in Hackney, home in the country.
Home in the country, yeah.
Early 90s. Doing all right.
We were doing all right, yeah. It came across like that, but yeah, it did. And we did. We had things that other people didn't have from for people like us growing up where we come from. But my parents were really warm and, welcoming to everyone.
Yeah.
When we were younger in the 80s, my dad used to have he bought land in Whitstable in Kent. So we always used to camping in Whitstable, and then he ended up buying a house in Whitstable. So for him, it was a natural progression to buying a house when he could. We had a great life growing up, yeah. It was hard work, but we had fun.
Yeah. And what was your relationship like with your dad? 'Cause you mentioned that, he would have you building on the weekends, and he seems like a visionary figure, buying the house, doing the house up. buying a place in the country. What have you taken away from him, from those experiences with him?
My relationship with my dad, it wasn't always the most talkative. You know, we didn't really have many conversations. I got on probably better with my dad in his later years. You know, in his early years, he was very difficult. I suppose he had a lot on his mind. So, but I had a great relationship with my mum. So I didn't feel as though I missed anything. You know, I was the youngest of 10. And, you know, me and my mum, you know, I always said to her, I'm her favourite. And she, you know, and she would laugh. But I always kind of watched him, and he was my greatest role model. But I didn't really have a great, you know, relationship with him growing up. It was kind of more from afar, really, watching him and seeing him how he was with where he wanted to be in life, really, which kind of shaped me as a person.
Your journey in music has been remarkable, but every story has a beginning. Walk us through how you first got your foot in the door and the path that eventually led you to music and to Snapper music in particular.
I came out of university with a degree in accounting and law, and I held my university degree, a certificate up, thinking I was going to get a guaranteed job. So I applied for all these graduate recruitment positions, and nothing happened. So in the end, I decided to temp. I started to get a few job interviews, but then you wouldn't get any further, really. With temping, you didn't really have to do much of a job interview. So you just got the job on spec, and you went there and you did a couple of months' work in whichever firm doing accounting. So that's what I did. So I did a few temping jobs, which kind of built my confidence up, and work in the world of finance. And then I went for the agency sent me for a job interview in Camden for a music publishing company. Now, I didn't know what music publishing was. I was probably about 21 years old or something. And they said to me, music publishing job. And I said, okay, I thought it was script music. I thought they were selling sheet music or something.
Okay.
So I went for an interview there, and a lady called Yvonne Miller, she, the first thing I know, she was a Trinidadian lady. She was their finance director. At the end of the interview, she asked me, where am I from? And I said, from Hackney. And she said, well, where are you really from? And I said, my parents are from St. Lucia and Grenada. She goes, oh, really nice to meet you, Fred. I said, okay. And then the interview went really well. And then I got the job offer. So I went to work for a music publishing company. She later told me that her associate didn't really want me, but she wanted me, and she fought to have me. So I always thank her for the opportunity, really, to get into the music industry. So I went to work for Palan Music Publishing, they were a copyright acquisition company. Mm-hmm. So they were the company that founded many of the companies like Tring, and they ended up purchasing companies like Leosung Publishing. In publishing, you have publishing, people who buy publishing, and you have people who just administer publishing catalogues. And Leosung was a publishing administration company for writers and publishers, but they also used to buy copyrights. And they also set up a music library company called Extreme, which has now gone on to be huge. Probably one of the leading figures in the sampling of music in film and television. And the Levinson family started it, and they were really good with me, actually. They on the first week, the owner's son, Mark Levinson, who's died since then, he said to me, Fred, is there anything you want to change around here? Let me know. We need a fresh pair of eyes, and just come in, my door was always open, and I really appreciate hearing that. It was one of the companies that they were starting up. They started up a record company. Well, they funded the record company, and they funded Extreme Music, and they did another company called Compact Collections, which is an ancillary rights collection company, which does all broadcast rights across Europe. So I was working mainly on the record company called Snapper Music. Mm-hmm. The company was growing very quickly, and then the company bought some copyrights that they had. There was a bit of an issue between the people the Levinsons who I had worked for, and the people who were heading up Snapper Music. They had an issue when Snapper was supposed to buy Castle Communications when it was sold, but we went quite far down in acquiring Castle, and then they decided to pull out, which was much to the annoyance of my predecessor, John Beecher. So we didn't actually purchase the catalogue, and we ended up with huge break costs. And when you try to purchase another company, and you have all of the financial and legal firms acting on your behalf, if you decide to pull out or something goes wrong in the transaction, you have what's called break costs. And these are the costs where you have to pay for all of the accountants and legal services. So it caused a bit of a rift between the owners. So it was at this point they said to me, Fred, well, we're not sure which way your path's going to go because we may not be continuing with this company. So I had to, for me, it was like a choice. So I had to either stay in Camden working with this group company or to go and work directly for Snapper. And I chose to go and work directly at Snapper. So I left and went to work directly for Snapper Music in around, I think it was about 1998, after about a year of starting. So it was a bit of a difficult start. But like most companies, when you start up any new company, you always have a bit of a difficult start, really. And it's how you navigate those early, a bit like trying to, get the raft out to the sea. The hardest part is getting past the break waves in the beginning. But once you've got it out to sea, you should be fine.
So tell us about Snapper Music. So you've moved into this company and you've decided, I'm going to stay here. Tell us about the company. What's it about? What's it like? What type of artists? What type of music? And how did you find your home there?
So Snapper Music is a record company in a very traditional sense. We were very traditional kind of model of we acquire catalogues from various artists, and we also sign new music, new artists to the label, and we release their new material, and we usually try to acquire their older material. So around the time in the beginning when I first moved over, we were doing artists like Peter Green, who used to be in Fleetwood Mac, and we had a load of other artists who were the drummer and guitarist from bigger bands like Halloween and whatnot, but who didn't do that well. But we also acquired bigger catalogues from bands like Wasp, which is a metal band in America, and Osric Tentacles and the Pretty Things, and we own most of the Wasp catalogue. So we made significant purchases using bank finance and venture capitalist finance to secure these acquisitions of catalogues. So I suppose it was geared up. Snapper was really geared up to kind of mirror what Castle did, which my predecessors used to run. Castle Communications was a similar company where they bought lots of really big labels like Pi, Transatlantic, and Sugar Hill Recordings, and then these copyrights have a life after an album is released. So you can continue exploiting the same catalogue for many, many years after its original release. With Snapper, we tried to do a similar model, which was to buy catalogues and continue to exploit them, putting out records, re-releasing old records, and then engaging with the artists to sometimes put out their new material. We did that quite well, actually. Yeah.
You've made some unconventional but bold financial decisions throughout your career. Like I've heard you speak about passing up pay rises in order to secure equity, which really interested me. What inspired those decisions, and what would you say to other entrepreneurs about the power of owning equity versus immediate financial reward?
My journey to getting to that point was I was an employee of Snapper Music. I moved to Snapper in around 1998. The relationship had soured with the Camden owners, the Levensons, and we took on new investors. And in those investors, we came up with a plan, an optimistic plan, I suppose. And that optimistic plan didn't really play out. I suppose, like lots of these institutional investors, they have an exit strategy. So they want to see them put in their money, and they want to see within a certain time period that they have an exit where they sell the company or float the company, as we probably thought back in the days that we would float Snapper Music, but it's based on turnover and profits going in the direction that you've said they would in the plan. And unfortunately, we didn't achieve some of those results, but we made lots of catalogue acquisitions, but the profits didn't flow. So after about 4 or 5 years, the new investors, they weren't willing to put in any more new money as promised without profits. So we then found a new investor in the name of Brian Morrison, who purchased the company. And at that point, really, it was around about 2004, we kind of realized that this was the last of speculative investors. So the company had to kind of, to perform, really. And Brian made the decision after purchasing the company that he wanted a change in management. So I took over running the company in 2005. And at that point, had to, unfortunately, as they say, fire your bosses, which is an unusual thing that I had to do. And I love my predecessors, John Beecher and Dougie Dudgeon, but it was something that hopefully wasn't too much of a surprise, but it was something that I had to do, yeah.
How did you approach that?
It's difficult. Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, it's really tough. But they were seasoned pros and they probably saw it coming. And it wasn't a surprise to them. And they knew it wasn't anything personal. And it's just business, as they say. But it's still tough. There's a kind of a softer side I always have to kind of go back when I have difficult decisions like that to make. And I kind of lean on my experience of my mum. And I kind of just think, you can deliver something really, not so nice, but in a really kind of empathetic way. If you just kind of, they may think you're an absolute tosser, but you can still, just be nice. And that's what I did. It was tough, but yeah. And I still remain friends with both of them, and I still am in contact with them and go for lunch. Yeah. So we still keep a relationship. After me becoming the managing director, it was at that point, it was around 2007 that I had my own thing going on with my care home companies, because my parents' company, their care home business closed down in around about 2000, which is completely aside from everything else. And we brought new tenants in to take over the building, but that company then went bust. Me and my sister had a decision to make in work, because she was working for somebody and I was working for somebody. But I said to her, look, why don't we try and start our own little company up together? Doing what we both know is in our heart, which is running residential care homes and care, in children's homes. So we said, okay, let's do it. So we started this care home business up. So that kind of was growing along at the same time in around 2007. So it was at that point that I had a real interest in trying to acquire more and more shares in Snapper Music. Obviously, I had a very good knowledge of the balance sheet, and I could see there were some minority shareholders in Snapper Music who owned small 1% and 2%, up to 7% shares in Snapper Music. So I contacted them, and I knew as a minority shareholder, there's not much you can do with your shares, but if I thought that if I was to be able to purchase all these little bits, it would give me something substantial, So I contacted a lot of these people and I bought their shares from them. We negotiated a price with them, and sometimes meeting them on the M25 to give them cash, to make them sign a share transfer form and navigate because when you buy shares of somebody, you have to also look at the articles of association for the company to make sure there were no preemption rights, that other shareholders can't buy them first. So you have to get them to waive their ability to purchase those shares if that's in the share agreement.
So just for the purpose of some of our listeners, as we go into conversations about shares, and for those that aren't familiar with understanding shares, what's the importance of shares within the company? Why would it be important for somebody to acquire shares? What's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, so I suppose the shares are everything, really. Who owns the shares owns the company. Mm-hmm. So behind every company, whatever shares they have, and they may have different classification of shares, it's the share ownership that determines who owns the company. and then who makes the decisions most likely takes the risks. Owning the shares also comes with its own issues. It's the major shareholders that usually guarantee the debt. So if there are debts in the company, loans, then those owners, then those majority shareholders will have to sign the loan security documents, and they'll have to provide their own, their house or whatever equity they've got against that security.
So what would make you want to do that, first and foremost? And secondly, as a married man, what role did your wife play in that? Because I'm sure she had something to say about, you acquiring shares. And we'll get more into that a little bit later, but I'm sure she had something to say about.
Yeah, my wife, my wife, she would always kind of trust my judgment. So if she's probably got a very limited knowledge of, share and that, but she knows fundamentals of, who owns the shares on the companies. And she saw me putting in more work into the company, and where I did have to have a conversation with her where, if I was to acquire enough shares, then at some point I would have to take on the debt responsibility. So that's where I had to have a conversation with her and say to her, Maria, we may have to put the house up as collateral against the loan. And she said, if you think it's a good idea, then I'll trust you.
How important is it for you to have somebody like that in your corner that trusts you, that can support you in that way, your vision, without putting up a wall? And, you speak to a lot of men and they'll say, I want to do this, but my wife or my girlfriend, and a lot of women that will say, my boyfriend doesn't get it, and my husband. How important is that to you, to be able to have that person in your corner that just says, I trust you, I get it, let's do it?
Yeah, it's really important. I speak to so many people who say, and I try to give them advice about, say buy to let or buy it, and they say, talk to my wife, Fred, please. I've been telling her I want to buy, do this or do that, but my wife won't let me. And it's really important to have somebody who supports you and who's somebody who gets it and who has the same vision as you. Really, part of their gaining that confidence is by seeing that you have done the research and you've looked into it, the whole subject, and then they go, well, you've looked into everything and you're making a calculated risk. And I've always, I sometimes, I always say to her, I bought houses and she hasn't seen them yet. You do need the support of somebody who's there by your side and who's there just to back you up, really. Yeah. And she's always been there. She's always backed me up on everything I've done, really.
You're a very lucky man.
but it's not always the case, though. It's not easy. Some people have, they worry about things. You've got to take a gamble in life. And I've always been somebody who's who's taken whatever we've earned and tried to invest it in something. So you've just got to have that, if that's what you want in life, you have to kind of have something which you're striving towards and keep pursuing that, really.
Do you think that that's something that's that you've learnt from growing up, from watching your parents and watching their journey of wanting something, then building it, and you doing the same, but in a different way?
I've always seen, like my dad, he wanted things that he wasn't really kind of supposed to have. So he wanted the house in the country, and as an economic migrant coming in on the Windrush, they weren't supposed to have houses in the country, and he wanted a house in the country. He wanted a nice car, and I've always been the same. I thought, well, I just wanted to have things that kind of people go, well, you weren't, you're not supposed to buy in the company, and they go, well, I'll buy in the company. And when I went to the bank and said, I want to take over the debt, and, the debt was, about £3 million, and they go, how are you going to provide security for this debt? And then they almost be dismissive. And I go, well, I can. Well, I can do this and do that, and I'll show you this. But it was difficult, they weren't always willing, in the beginning to let me take over the debt. But I had to manage to convince them, over a period of time that they could. And we did have a helpful bank manager who was on my side really, to kind of to help me facilitate that transaction when I ended up finally purchasing the company.
And I'm going to get to how you purchased the company, but what steps did you take to convince the bank that you could fulfill the debt?
Yeah, so he said to me, I suppose it's their media bank, so they're used to investing in the music industry. It's Kscope Bank, and it was a lovely fellow called Richard Skinner. He just believed in me. He said, Fred, the first thing we as a bank have to do is we have to believe in the person who are lending the money. And he said, I believe in you that you're going to make the right decision when it comes to it. And when I went from working for a company to actually running the company, one of the biggest transitions I had to go through was to make that transition from when you're just an employee, things kind of happen around you. But then when you become the person in overall charge, you have to make decisions that may bankrupt the company or may make the company do really well. So if I said to you, right, can you make the decision? Should we make this purchase for £500,000? You may go, I don't know if I want to do that. Is it going to be all on me?
Yeah.
Because then you have to make that decision all on you, and you've got 30 or 40 staff who are believing in your decision to purchase a catalogue. So you have to have some belief. It's about doing the homework, making sure that you're making this decision for the right reasons, really. So I wanted to really sign an artist and probably paid over the odds for an artist. A Cradle of Filth, a heavy metal band. For those who don't know, a lot of the music that Snapper does is a mixture of progressive rock and heavy metal bands. Yeah, so yeah, lots of heavy metal and progressive rock. So we signed a band called Cradle of Filth for their new album. So you have to convince others that you have that ability to make the decisions based on research, a bit of gut instinct and a bit of, forward thinking, but really based on, mindset, mainly based on research, really.
Your journey from Snapper's early days to becoming the managing director and major shareholder is truly remarkable. But what do you think was the turning point that made you realize, right, I want to take the reins and I want to own this company? What was that moment and what did you do to make that happen?
I'd been running the company for a few years and I thought, do you know what? I know what I'm doing now. I'm good at this. I can actually do this. And I don't want to start all over again in another company. So I really want now to purchase this company. So the person who bought the company died, Brian Morrison. He fell off his horse. Family inherited the estate. Some polo clubs and record companies and lots of other things. Publishing rights. He was the early publisher of George Michael's and Wham. So it was at that point I carried on, continued running it. I said to them I wanted to purchase the company. So I said, and I was always making, I said, rather than taking salary, I would, for instance, instead take equity instead of salary, which probably suited the owners at the time because, instead of paying you, they can just pay you in shares. So I took shares instead.
So at this point, you've been acquiring shares from other shareholders. And now you're foregoing some salary in return for shares.
Yeah. I got to a point where I needed probably just the last batch to get me over 50% shareholding. And I made her an offer, which she accepted. They accepted. So,
and 50% would make you the majority shareholder and give you control of the company.
I suppose they were looking to sell anyway because they were looking to reduce their debt exposure. So it suited them and suited us and me that I would take over the debt and I would become the majority shareholder. And it was a bit of a gamble for me because you only own 50%, but you're taking on 100% of the debt.
Yeah.
And they still owned quite a sizable chunk without any responsibility to the debt. So I just took that gamble and thought I'll acquire the rest of the shares in time, which I did. A few years later, I bought the rest of the shares out.
Wow, it's incredible. So as someone who started at ground level and you eventually became managing director, What personality traits and practices have been most essential to your success, do you think?
I would say appreciating that businesses like mine, Snapper Music, is really a people business, really, first and foremost. So I'm not the best marketer. I'm not the best legal affairs. I'm not the best salesperson, but I know I know how to read a contract. I read contracts all the time. I know what the marketing campaigns are. I read them and go through them all the time. I know where people are selling. I know what's selling. I know what's not selling. I know the state of it. So you've got to have an understanding of what everybody does in the company and know intrinsically kind of not how to do their job, but know a bit about their job. I've studied InDesign, so I know what our production person's doing on InDesign. I look at the contracts and I'm wondering why he hasn't put certain clauses in the contracts, favoured nations, etc. So you know where you're around lots of different areas. Also have to have a good understanding of what they do and believe in and find the right people to do those jobs. So in Snapper, lots of the people, half the staff have been there for more than 10 years, and some of them have been there for 20 odd years, like me. You have to look after people primarily and create an environment where people want to stay and be fair and make it enjoyable as well at the same time,
Yeah. So let's talk about investment. Yes. One of your favorite subjects. You successfully secured significant backing for Snapper to fuel its growth and to scale to new heights. What's the secret to positioning yourself as an attractive proposition for investors? And for those aspiring music entrepreneurs out there, can you walk us through the process of securing this type of investment? What does it really take?
Okay, so if you want to attract investment, the first thing you've got to, I suppose, remember is you're asking somebody to put their money into your project. So the first thing they're going to want to know is lots of statistical information. So they're going to want to see plans. They're going to want to see plans on what you've done so far, and also your projections of where those plans take you into the future. And everyone's seen Dragon's Den, and when they say, how do you see this exponential growth from, I don't know, from 100,000 year one to 2 million year two, and they just call it fanciful. So, so you really got to make sure if you do have growth in your plan, you know exactly where it's coming from, and it's really, as they say, they invest in the person first. So, you have to be a kind of person which is investable, and you have to have a plan and a project which are investable ideas. And you just have to you have to just convey that you've done your research. I can't, convey the importance of that more. In the past, when we have tried to sell assets, and we haven't done that many times really, but when we've tried to raise an investment in the past, we have got every statistic going, in terms of how many sales we expect to see, different price breaks, and where we see the new funding coming from, and where the money's going to be going into, and how they, you almost need to roadmap. They're trying to think where they're going to get their money back. So if you get into the mindset of them, then your plan should be geared up towards what they think. So they'll also be concerned about security of, people leaving the company or them putting the money in, and suddenly the people fall away and their money isn't secure. So you need to provide a plan where the people are very stable in those jobs. They're not putting their money into something that, could just run in themselves, because, an investor doesn't want to run a record company or an idea. They want you to do it, and you to turn their money around into a profit.
How do you go about finding an investor?
Finding an investor, that's a difficult part. I mean, you have various agents who will try to help you try to find investment. A lot of them will say that they invest, but most of the time they, like artists with us, the artists who come to us with their new record, you're probably less interested in than the ones that we're going after. So most investors will come to you. So when you typically go to them, it's a bit more, you become one of lots of people who are ringing on their doorbell saying, we'd like investment. It's really about trying to make, like in the music industry, when you're trying to sell an art, you're trying to get signed with a new material, to do build your numbers up in terms of streams, platform, of social media numbers and everything else. So when you go to somebody with an investment idea, it's kind of half baked. It's at least more than half baked, and it's not just a plan, which is at its real infancy level. Mm-hmm. It's at a level where they can see that the growth is going to come, and you've already done a lot of the work, and you could probably do it without them. But where you're going to see that extra growth is by their capital investment to see that that bigger growth.
You mentioned agents. For those that don't know much about investment, where do you find an agent to help you find an investor? How does that work?
I suppose there are agents out there who will try to help you try to secure a new investor. Most of those agents they'll take a large commission, of the eventual deal. But again, they are out there. Usual searches will probably find a myriad of type investors, but also there are probably lots of public type funding, lots of different funding streams available, which are probably for a startup investor. They've got the BPI scheme to help new music exports. The government run investment programs, which are out there. AIM, I'm sure, probably will.
Yeah, I've done a investment syndicate for AIM as well. Yeah, so another place you can go and get some money or you can seek out investors, I should say, not get some money. You never know. Running a company like Snapper requires not just a love of music, but also sharp business acumen. What are some of the key business decisions that's defined Snapper's trajectory under your leadership?
Under my leadership, I would say we made some significant purchases from the Warner Divestment Fund. They had to divest some of their music catalogue. Now, the majors never sell any of their copyrights, but they wanted to buy, I think it's the largest stake in EMI, the Monopolies and Mergers Committee, which is, the anti-mergers company. They said you can't buy it unless you get rid of some of your catalogue because you're going to become too dominant in the market. So they had to sell a load of their copyrights. So they approached the independent sector. And so they had to sell some of their rights to their competition. Yeah. So they had big price tags on everything. So they didn't really want to sell of it. So they put big price tags on all of their copyrights. So we purchased lots of copyrights from artists which were affiliated with us. Some of those purchases, they were expensive, and people thought I was probably crazy at the time to pay those figures. But they've worked out really well because of, I suppose, the biggest thing that's growth that's happened in the music industry is the advent of streaming. Since probably about 2015, it started to see significant numbers, and it's changed the whole landscape of the music industry. Really, it's turned the old model of in years ago, copyrights were likened. They once did a bond called the Bowie bond, which they tried to monetize and create a bond on the stock market for David Bowie's music copyrights. And since then, music copyrights have had a value beyond their years. And streaming has now helped to bolster that, because it's now sales on catalogues are not so much linked to selling the physical copies, having a production department, marketing, warehouse, stock of, selling CDs and vinyl. You also have this sizable income for certain streamed artists.
It's almost like added value to the asset being the record, right? Because you can see in real time that asset is growing in value with every stream that takes place. That's
right. Yeah, exactly. It becomes like an annuity, so every, and you can sometimes you have an artist who gets played on, either gets picked up in a Netflix film, and then suddenly your streams go up, or you get a sync that happens, for a film, and suddenly, your streams, go up exponentially because kids start doing like a TikTok dance to that song that they've heard in the film. Or in the program. So we've had that, where some of our songs have been played in movies, and then the kids start doing, TikTok dances to them.
So on that, a lot of your catalogue spans decades, different genres. How do you ensure that Snapper continue to innovate whilst staying true to the roots of the original compositions, the original music, and the original audience in this new era of streaming and social media and everything else?
As an independent record company, and I think like most independent record companies, they have to operate in the niches. So we operate in the small niches of the industry. So we operate in the metal, heavy metal, and the progressive rock. And if we, the temptation is to sometimes want to operate in the mainstream and and have the big hits in the pop and R&B and black acts, but they just don't. It's very difficult to. In the old days, it was almost impossible to get records played at the radio.
Yeah,
and it's even more difficult now because radio isn't as important, and you can, but so you can go in there, you can build up your numbers with SoundCloud, or things just become viral hits. So we operate in a niche which is comfortable for us. So the way we innovate is to continually kind of operate within our niche and grow that market, and really try to exploit the niche that we're in, because we're in the kind of collector's market where people continue to purchase. So we do these lavish box sets, these 40 CD box sets.
Yeah.
And those kind of things. So we kind of operate in those niches, really.
So the physical is still really important to you.
Physical was still very important, yeah. So we're still probably about 70% physical. One of these days, I always say our warehouse down in Brighton that's holding 2 million units of stock. When is it? These CDs, who's still buying them? But luckily, somebody's still buying them.
So how do you in a market that is completely leaning towards digital streaming, you're seeing majors making huge cuts because they're digitizing everything and utilizing AI. How does a company like yours that is selling 70% physical manage to maintain that type of sales, I guess, within that space, and also embrace AI and the future?
Yeah, so we still embrace that. We've just done a recent completely AI generated new. We've just done a new album for one of our bands, a Pineapple Thief, and we've done a complete AI generated artwork for the whole booklet, really, which is amazing. So we continue to strive and adopt new principles. I suppose AI will end up becoming a bit like the computer was, the innovation that the computer was back in the 90s. It's just going to become a tool, and a really good tool for people to probably help them write songs, which they probably will never admit to, and help them to make records. So yeah, for us, again, it's about operating in those niches, and I always say the principle is just continue doing what you're good at. If you're in doubt of where the direction of the company is, look at the past, see where you're good at, and kind of stick to that. Trying to veer off the path. You should always, as in the music industry, we should always be putting out records we love, and we still do. We always have at least. So we have a policy of about no more than 4 new artists that we're working on each year. So we take 4 new artists, and we try to push their new music. We're bands that are not necessarily startups. So we always try and remain current
Yeah.
And it gives everyone in the office, a chance to be excited about something that they're passionate about as well.
Yeah.
It's about kind of mixing that whole business up, really. But that's how the music industry has always been. You have all your new music at the front, but you've got the catalogue which is, mainly bolstering the company.
Yeah.
And propping up the company.
How important is it for you to keep your employees excited? You've mentioned that, a lot of the team have been there for a very long time. How do you keep them motivated? How do you keep them excited? And how do you stay motivated and excited?
Yeah, the staff, I suppose we do lots of, fun things like going away, canal boat, barge trips and skiing trips and stuff like that. And just kind of make it a nice environment for people to work in. As I say, my staff will go, yeah, but what about work from home, Fred? And I go, because I've always been a kind of traditionalist, like to see people, and I'm always in the office, and they probably...
I couldn't work for you then, Fred, so... You're like, what? We'll come in the office now.
Come in the office, exactly, yeah, kind of, yeah, so, but yeah, so we try. It's a mixture, isn't it? Some people's lives have changed since lockdown,
yeah,
and we've taken it on board. Some people have got dogs, and they've moved further away and whatnot.
Yeah,
and with certain types of jobs you can work with it, but some other jobs where you've got to see him more person to person. So we just kind of, it's a bit of a mixture. Just try and keep it fun. We'll always be there to kind of talk to people, and as I say. Hopefully, as a record company, it shouldn't be too hard to attract people because people want to find out that and I've got a love of information and interest for the if you're I don't know how anyone can get bored. You could be looking at how our the money flows in America, BMI, ASCAP, to see how the publishing royalties flow in across Europe, PPL. There's always something that people should be, I always say you should be coming and asking me about because it's a fascinating industry to work in.
So what would you say to somebody that wants to get to your position? What advice would you give them? Speaking of, there's always something to learn. What advice would you give to someone trying to get into your position?
I would just say, don't be afraid of starting at the bottom and don't be too precious about what you do once you get your feet in. Look at the person. I started at the bottom. And I was just always quick to ask the person next to me, what did you do? And what do you do? And I would say to them, a lady was in, she just did the Leo Sung copyright administration. And by that, I saw that they were, she was administering a catalogue because they owned the Baywatch song, Always Be Here. And I'd say, well, how does that work? And where does the money come from? And she would tell me it came from the BMI ASCAP in America. And then you suddenly work out how the money flows, and they would take, how their commission structures work. And then you'd ask the people, so once you're in, if you've got an interest, people would always want to tell you about what job they do. So it's about showing that interest. If you really want to, read a contract, see how the contract structures are worked, on ownership and licensed. And it's through those kind of things. Once you then have an idea of what everyone does, then you have a good idea of finance, then you probably, people will be looking at you to be promoted, up.
Are you a naturally curious person?
Very curious, yeah.
Because that, the answer you gave strikes curiosity to me. It's somebody that is curious about different things and is willing to kind of ask the question and not look silly, I guess. I think a lot of people are afraid of asking the question in the fear that people are going to think, oh, that person doesn't know what they're doing. But it seems to me like you're extremely curious and you want to know what's happening in different areas.
Yeah, I've always been like that. I've never really been frightened to ask or to say, actually, can we just, I'm lost on what we're talking about here. I've always, just put your hand in the air and say, sorry, could you just explain that again, please? And if I don't know something about something, by tomorrow, I'll come back in and I'll probably know a lot more. So I'll go home and my wife will always ask me, what are you looking at on your phone now? And I'll say to her, some contract or term I've heard somebody say some word. Growing up in a school that we went to in North London, people speaking, they use all these, big words, and I don't even know what these words mean. So I always, I'd want to know what things mean. So I've always been curious about anything really. Yeah.
Yeah, you seem very curious to me. So, what's next for Snappa Music? What does the future look like?
More catalog acquisitions. Hopefully, we're going to sign. We're signing bands all the time. We've released, our band. We've just released a new artist recently, Orange Goblin, and we're more box sets to come. We've got loads of box sets. We've got fantastic new Bonzo Doodah band coming out. So it's really an eclectic mix of releases, really. Yeah. So we continue to do, as I say, what we're good at, and we just continue releasing records that we like and love, and servicing the bands that we've kind of become friends. Like we've got our Norwegian death metal band called Dark Throne, and they refuse to tour, and they won't tour, but they operate out of Finland.
Okay,
and they've got a massive following, but they've just become like our friends. We buy catalogs, and when we usually acquire these catalogs, the artists haven't been paid for God knows how long. And then we'll start putting the records back out. We'll start selling them in the shops, and the artists suddenly they start to derive an income, and then they're really grateful. And it's kind of about building that community of keeping those artists going, keeping their income going, really.
What's your thoughts on catalogue acquisitions at the moment? There's a lot of talk around that. You're seeing major players coming into the music space, acquiring huge catalogues at eye-watering prices. And there's a real kind of almost a gold rush towards catalogue acquisition in its different forms. What's your thoughts and your takes on the current climate of catalogue acquisitions?
Yeah, it's I can see why it's fueled, because it's going back to this annuity. The longest running subscription model is the BBC. They get this money every month, and then Sky had it, and before everyone wants the subscription model business. So you can't buy anything for an outright fee anymore. It has to be, they'd rather take £1 a month from you than get you to pay 50 quid.
Yeah.
So it's, what's fueling all of these catalog acquisitions is it's the principle of all of this ad markets, the Spotify's and the YouTube monies, and it's the annuity that, because these companies who are backing, people like Hypnosis, who you're probably referring to, that longevity in that income, and especially in the publishing, because the publishing rights last longer than the record rights, because they go for the years after the writer, as opposed to the record rights, which just go for 70 years after the release of the actual record. So, there's bound to be a huge spike, but it's a difficult one, isn't it? There's much talked about the Hypnosis strange structure of the deals, but it's you've got to be a bit careful about purchasing rights based on streaming income, because the streaming income may be a bit variable at the moment, because some people are seeing more income from things like YouTube Shorts. Because I came across a catalogue the other day to buy, and it was just based on the pre-YouTube Shorts money was next to nothing, but post it was huge, but they may not last. So there may be it might just be a nuance just with one or two songs. But yeah, it's great. I mean, I think it's great that it's created this interest and buzz around catalogs. Obviously not if you're buying, but if you're in ownership, it's great. So I think it's a good thing for the industry in general. Yeah.
What do you think the music industry will look like in 10 years, and how have you positioned yourself and Snappa to take advantage of where you think it will be?
Yeah, I suppose if you're in rights ownership, you'll always survive, really. And my position is, we're pretty stable. We bought our own offices. We're debt free, all those good things. So we and I'm not looking to sell. So, I'm trying to think of the next generation if my kids wanted to get into the industry. And hopefully, if you just build a solid foundation for them, and then hopefully maybe they can then look at new signings, new bands, music that they may want to, artists that they want to work with to try and, change the direction of the company, the artist, the music. That would be for somebody else, a later date really to kind of decide. But I would have done my part to have left it in a good state to hand over to the next person, really.
And what's next for you?
Next for me.
What does the future hold for you?
Yeah, I think I would just like to. Sometimes mine is a love of work, and if I took out that work, what would I do without it? I think mine goes back to my passion of loving the building work. That physical work.
Yeah.
I still love all that. Growing up doing it, going full circle, pushing a wheelbarrow up. But sometimes those things give me equal pleasure to some, to the work I do, in the record company. Because it's, when you're working, you're building something. So in addition, I own care homes now, and that business I started with my sister back in 2007 is now nearly, it's probably about 20 years old now, because we started really in 2004, but we started it properly in 2007 together. But unfortunately, my sister, Paula, she passed away in 2009. So I had the choice, to carry on or to carry on doing both or do one. And I decided to do both, really. And so her husband, Donald, who I continue to work with, and that's a kind of a family-run business as well. Yeah. So I employ lots of my family, my brother Eamon, and his wife Susan, and my sister Sheila, and run by lady Amanda. We run that care home company, and we now have over 25 care homes, and we employ about 300 staff.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And we look after mainly people with autism.
That's
autistic
brilliant.
Spectrum disorder, yeah. And we look after about 70 people with autistic spectrum, yeah. We have some amazing results. It really gives me amazing pleasure to kind of see the transformation in their, from where they may have come from in long stay inpatient units to working with us, where we build environments for them to grow and to nurture them, really.
That's brilliant. Well done. That's really, really important.
It was strange. 1 minute I've got a social worker in my head, next minute I've got a band manager.
A metal band.
Metal band.
How important is legacy to you? Because it seems like, you've continued the work of your parents with the care homes. You've continued to create a legacy for your sister. With that as well, and having the family involved, it seems like a huge legacy company project. How important is legacy to you? You've mentioned, handing the company down to your kids as well.
Yeah, I think it's, I suppose by trying to keep growing something, I suppose you just don't know when to stop growing something. I've never really been into selling, thinking of, this should be geared up towards. I had never had a plan to build something to sell it. So I just kind of always had a plan to just keep building and then building. And one day, a bit like my parents did for us, was to pass something down and to give your children a job. My dad was always, he's a massive believer in he wouldn't never have a credit card, and he always had cash, but he wasn't frightened of taking that debt, and he wasn't frightened of taking a risk. And I just kind of want to instill those things to my kids, really, and give them that power of belief, really. And that power of belief just comes, maybe like a lot of Caribbean parents. My mother always said to me, pray every night. Pray every night and ask for what you want.
Yeah.
And I've always done that. And it, not saying, try and advocate with a certain religion, but you just kind of advocate a belief in something, if you continue to believe in something, and then if you have that belief that it will come true, then it will, then it will manifest it in your mind, and then you would then help you to succeed, really, if you believe it's going to come true.
I think belief is really important, and I think that's a good way to lead into a final question. This is the Be Unstoppable podcast. It's built around a mindset, an attitude, a belief to be unstoppable. What does the concept of being unstoppable mean to you? And how do you embody that in your own career and in your personal life?
Yeah, being unstoppable for me means being relentless in your pursuit of what you want in a nice way. Just to not stop. Whenever you get a pushback or rejection, don't think, oh, I'm going to give up. Let's, keep going. Don't, if you can't get there one way, find another way, and it may not come today. And that's what some people think, well, I can't do it. How am I, it may take a bit of a long-term strategy. Like I did. If I couldn't buy snapper in a day, I knew it was going to take me a lot longer to buy snapper. We didn't build 25 care homes in Adelaide in a day, and we've had lots of knockbacks, but it's just about being, relentless, unstoppable in your pursuit of what you want, and don't let anyone put you off, or frighten you. Have belief in your own research. Believe that I've done the work. I know, and take the risk. There will be a crunch point where you're going to have to make that choice. Do I buy a new car, or do I take a risk and start my own business? Do I leave my current employer and start a new business? Well, probably best to start it in parallel with your business. So it's knowing when opportunities come your way, make sure you take them. They may say that you've been lucky, but it's about taking every chance that you've had. If somebody gives you an opportunity, would you take it? If I said, would you buy this one? I started off by one share. And with one share, it was almost useless. He said to me, "Why are you buying this one share? It's absolutely useless to anyone, Fred."
Yeah.
And I said, "No, but I want it." And then if from an acorn, you can have an oak tree.
Wow, incredible! I think that's a fantastic way to end this conversation. From an acorn, you can have an oak tree. But it's been amazing having you on the podcast. You've been insightful. You've been inspiring. You've given us some real food for thought. And I just want to say thank you for coming on and for sharing your story.
And thank you for inviting me, Ben. It's been really, some great questions and it's been really interesting. It's been as I say, I was a bit nervous coming in to do this, as I said, at the top of it. But it's been great. I've really enjoyed it.
I'm glad we had the chance to chat. And remember, guys, you can get bonus footage and find out more about shares, investment, and being a managing director of a company. Head over to the Patreon for the bonus footage and check all of that out. Fred will be breaking it down. Remember, you have the power to choose your path in life, but always choose to be unstoppable.